Okay, so welcome. My name is Dr. Geraint Parry. I am the Executive Officer of the Association of Applied Biologists. I'm the Chair of the Royal Society of Biology Plant Sciences Group, and more relevant for this, I'm a member of the Plant Health Professional Development Advisory Group, which is run by the RSP. So this is the third event in their RSP Plant Health series, and this is done in partnership with Defra. And this is a new partnership which builds on several previous and ongoing RSP projects in the plant health area, which includes the Plant Health Professional Register, the undergraduate studentships, and also the Plant Health Summit for Future Leaders, which we hosted in March 2021. And in the future, this partnership aims to develop a diverse community from across the sector and build the UK plant health capability, capacity, and resilience. Okay, so today, though, we're looking a little outside the UK, and this event will explore the use of multi-country coordination to limit the spread of transboundary pests in Africa, and we'll touch upon some of the projects, some of the many projects that CABI are doing towards the limit of spread of these pests. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. MaryLucy Oronje, who is joining us from Nairobi today. So Dr. Oronje has 10 years experience specializing in crop production, integrated pest management, biological control, SPS, crop pollination and pollinator conservation. She's got a PhD from the Bielefeld University in Germany, and currently she is an SPS scientist managing a number of sanitary and phytosanitary projects based in the CABI office in Nairobi, as I said. So, and she has managed a wealth of projects and training in SPS measures. So welcome, MaryLucy. Just to tell everyone on the call that this is being recorded. I guess you knew that already. And for questions, so we encourage lots of questions to have this to be a really interactive event. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat. In the Q&A, we'll identify them better then, and I will then pass them on to MaryLucy afterwards. Okay, so without further ado, let me welcome MaryLucy to share, invite you to share your screen, and we will continue. Thanks very much.
Right, thank you very much for that introduction, and welcome everyone to this presentation on multicultural coordination to limit the spread of transboundary pests. Before I begin, just want to indicate that this presentation has been developed with a number of colleagues who are not present here today, but I would like to appreciate their efforts contributing to this presentation. The other is also that we'd like to really thank the Royal Society of Biology for this invitation to be able to share with you today. In my presentation today, I'll focus on a bit of introduction and also highlight some of the recent pest invasions Africa, selected projects on plant health and SPS and trade, indicating how the ongoing efforts to reduce and limit the spread of this pest to other countries in Africa. And also some challenges and opportunities that I believe the participants in this webinar might be interested in, either in developing some solutions or bringing up efforts with the countries in Africa to be able to manage some of these pests. Before also we proceed, I want just to have a brief introduction about CABI. CABI is Center for Agriculture and Biosciences International. We are headquartered in Wallingford in the UK, and it's an intergovernmental institution, really having about 49 member countries to date. These member countries are important because they drive our agenda through their needs, but also their feedback on what areas we should be investing in. Our areas of focus include food safety and nutrition security. We have also a number of projects on climate change and biodiversity. We also focus on gender and youth, and also economic development. Our expertise are quite diverse. We have teams on plant health. We have also teams in development of communication and extension materials for wider reach of farmers and other users. We have a team on digital development, and also a team that works on invasive species, publishing and value chains and trade. All these to be able to work towards improving development and also in the environment conservation. I would also want to introduce the topic of today in some of the a number of definitions so that we are together. So for instance, in this particular meeting, we'll be referring to pests and including diseases, weeds, and all these that affects, are injurious to plants and plant products. So this we adopt the definition from the ISPM 5 on glossary of terms. Also on transboundary pests, this is sometimes very difficult to define, but in the slide I'll put the definition by FAO. That is the transboundary plant pests and diseases are migratory, the pests that pose significant threat to food security, trade, and livelihoods of people in affected countries. However, I want to add that the transboundary pests in this case will also include invasive pests and also migratory pests that we will look at shortly. This term has been proposed for the current edition in the ISPM 5, the IPPC ISPM 5 on glossary of terms because of different definitions. Today we'll be looking at them as pests that are quarantined or present in some countries but can have impact on plant health. Also, invasive pests, we will also tackle this. These are pests that are introduced outside their normal growing areas and have impact on nature and also general plant health and biodiversity. So we'll also touch base on that. I've highlighted in this slide some of the important pests for Africa, and I just want to highlight a number. Here there are 19, but there could be more. The list is not exhaustive. We have the desert locust. This has been a very important pest in the region in Africa, especially the Eastern Africa region, including Somalia and South Sudan and Kenya. We also have the tomato leaf miner, a pest that has really spread across Africa. We also have the fall armyworm that probably you might be aware about in terms of the devastating effect it had once it was introduced in Africa. I also want to highlight the banana bunchy top virus that is continuously spreading in Africa in a number of countries. And also the Fusarium wilt disease tropical raceful, currently only reported in Mozambique, but have potential in spreading to other countries. There are a number, as I mentioned, this list is not exhaustive. So why do we have so many of these biological invasions in Africa? As you may be aware about, our borders are very porous. In some countries, you have relatives living both sides of the country, for instance, Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. So people spread these invasive species probably through movement of planting materials. But also some of these pests do not have borders, so they can easily cross from one geographical area to another. We also have very weak border biosecurity in terms of inspections, and also lack information in terms of what are the potential invasions. However, when these invasions occur, there's devastating effects on biodiversity, agricultural production, and also on economics, especially through the agricultural trade. Once these pests are introduced, they become very important pests in terms of trade. In this slide is just a highlight of some of these pests that I mentioned in my previous slide. And here I also want just to show the papaya mealybug, which is also quite spreading very fast in West Africa and Eastern Africa. We have here the potato cyst nematode. And recently we have the golden snail that has been detected in Kenya only so far. So these are pests that continually affect our production In this slide is the maize-lethal necrosis disease that you might be aware about, quite devastating in terms of maize production and seed health. Also, we have the banana bunchy top on this other slide. You will see how this has been devastating in other countries that where it has been reported. And this, maybe I will just share, why do we have these pests coming in and really spreading and getting established in Africa? One of the things is what the highlights that I've given from papaya mealybug to bunchy top virus. None of this has been eradicated. Once they are introduced, they multiply, they establish, and spread to new areas, even to across borders. Why? There's this particular slide that I want to share on the generalized pest invasion curve developed by the Plant Biosecurity Australia. So you'll see that if a country or a region invests in prevention, and this is through activities like pest risk analysis, import control that allows them to put up measures to reduce the introduction of this particular quarantine pests into their countries and the region. Also, a lot of awareness in terms of what pests that are likely to come and how devastating they are. If a country invests in that, investment in prevention can be very important in preventing the invasion of invasive pests. However, once the pests are introduced, for instance, the case that I've mentioned a number of them, and it becomes possible to eradicate, but only at the early stages if there's early detection and also emergency response activities to eradicate the pests at the very initial small number that have been introduced. However, that rarely happens, and most of the time the pests multiplies, and we have probably now the pests being spread to within the country of introduction, but also to other neighboring countries, either through trade or by self dispersal. When that happens, you have a situation where now the pest is everywhere, and therefore investment in the eradication or containment may not be possible. And there is now currently investment in how just to manage the pest through activities like integrated pest management. However, by that time, the impact on food production, the impact on trade has been enormous. So it's just important that I highlight in this slide that prevention, of course, as said before, is better than management. And therefore, most of the countries, when they invest on the prevention through a pest risk analysis and other activities, may be able to help in the management of this invasive pests. However, that is not the case, and that's why you see a number of invasive pests that I've highlighted. There has been no really a report on successful eradication so far on any of those pests that I highlighted in the slide. Now, I just want to also to highlight some of selected plant health projects that we have with partners that are targeting some of these pests that I've highlighted. One of these particular project is one on early warning and response, preparing the countries to detect early, but also to respond in terms of management of these pests. One of the projects is funded by FAO for the sub-region in Eastern Africa, covering 9 countries. And this is targeting a number of pests, most of them highlighted in one of my first slide on the plant pests are important in Africa. The other is we are doing a project also with FAO under the for the SADC region countries, the 16 member states, and here we are developing IPM practices for tomato leaf miner, for maize-lethal necrosis disease, for fruit fly, for lammerworm, and banana fusarium wilt. And these are geared to help stop the spread into other countries within the SADC region, but for those countries that are already having some of these pests, how to manage this particular pest and during production. We are also doing PRA trainings for the SADC under this particular project and for the SADC region to be able to identify some of the risks that they have with the trading partners and be able to put up measures that will limit the introduction of new pests into their countries. The other project that we are involved in is on papaya mealybug management, especially for Kenya. And this pest was reported in East Africa in 2013 in Tanzania, and recently 2016 in Kenya. But the pest has been very devastating, and the host range is also quite wide, with also the potential to move to other countries. In fact, recent report has indicated presence in Uganda as well. The symptoms are quite devastating, as you can see. The main host being papaya mealybug, it has wiped, it's not that it can, it has wiped some of the papaya plantations in Kenya. And also the host range is very wide. It attacks other fruit trees or other crops are growing in the field, in the farmers, including cassava. And this is very devastating. What we have done is to be able to understand what is the global distribution currently. In East Africa, as I mentioned, it is now in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and also in West Africa. In West Africa, the pest was already controlled using biological control, the classical biological control agent introduction. In this slide, this is the potential spread of papaya mealybug across Africa. And you can see it's just a matter of time. As I mentioned, currently it's already been reported in Uganda, and the countries in the region that are having similar climates to Kenya and Tanzania and are cropping papaya mealybug have the potential of getting papaya mealybug into their country. So this pest is quite devastating, and we have joined hands with other countries to be able to manage it and limit its spread. In terms of management, there are no registered synthetic insecticides for control, and it's very difficult given the wide host the wide host range, and also the nature of the particular pest. These are papaya mealybug and resistance to insecticides. So the only viable way to manage this using area-wide approaches was to adopt what was used in West Africa, the biological control agent, to introduce into Kenya. So now what we are engaging in is towards a classical biological control strategy for the sustainable management of papaya mealybug. And what we are using is this particular biological control agent that is called, I want to read the name correctly, Aceraphagus papae. We have adopted this from Ghana, West Africa, and now we are doing a biological control program in Kenya. Now we have evaluated the host ranges and the preferences and efficacy of this particular biological control agent in Kenya. We have now done mass multiplication, and there's current releases ongoing, even currently as I speak, in the first area that is what detected, that is the coastal province neighboring Tanzania. We are now releasing this particular biological control agent into the environment. What we have also now gained is, because of the introduction in Uganda now, the detection, this also will be exploited so that we stop the invasion, the spread to other countries in Africa. So there's expansion of releases planned for Uganda and South Sudan this year. Another potential risk that I wanted to highlight in today's presentation is banana fusarium wilt, tropical race 4. This is a slide that have been contributed by Professor Altos from Stellenbosch University, who is leading this particular study on tropical race 4, the fusarium wilt. And he mentioned that this is quite also a devastating pest, also now currently just reported in Mozambique, but with a big potential of movement into other countries. I want to highlight here that banana is a very important crop in Africa, especially in the Eastern Africa and Southern Africa, both for food, but also for export. And therefore, this particular pest is quite a risk to many of the countries. Most of this is because, as I mentioned, is the porous borders that we have, and also the international trade and lack of awareness of farmers and also exporters and people moving from one country to another, and the potential these risks actually give in terms of the production and in terms of the trade that we have with this banana, fresh banana, especially when you look at the Cavendish, which is exported. Though the pest cannot be transmitted through the banana fingers that are exported, but the production is severely currently affected in Mozambique, which is a major banana export country. A number of regional activities have been now developed, for instance, on training, on banana fusarium wilt, on inspection, how to dissemination of management strategies. I mentioned that CABI is also involved in development of management strategies for this fusarium wilt. The bad thing with fusarium wilt for TR4 and other fusarium wilts, once it is detected, introduced into production facilities, it is impossible to be able to eradicate. And therefore, concerted efforts are better managing stopping the introduction than managing the pest itself. Also, there is a regional activity in the SADC member states to be able to increase, awareness, identifying the different strain also of fusarium wilts generally and mapping them, but also how to do the risk analysis and put up phytosanitary measures to be able to reduce the spread. These are some of the countries that are currently at risk of getting fusarium wilt, FOC-TR4. We have here the reds are the countries that are high risk of introduction. This is Mozambique right here, where the pest has been detected already and is spreading within the country. So we have Zambia, we have Tanzania, we have also South Africa. And what is common in these countries is the borders, but also the fact that they grow this particular banana variety, that's the Cavendish, that is very susceptible to FOC-TR4. The other countries that are medium risk is Angola, and this is DRC and Botswana, but these are low risk countries. So a number of multi-component contingency plan is now being planned in Africa for FOC-TR4. For instance, on awareness, surveillance is ongoing in Mozambique and the borders, the countries that are bordering Mozambique. There is concerted effort in production of clean planting material. There's also research and development in terms of identifying other Cavendish varieties that are resistant to FOC-TR4. And of course, marshalling the policy support from politicians and the leadership in the countries, and putting up biosecurity measures, especially within Mozambique, to reduce the in-country spread that normally ultimately would lead to cross-country spread. With this effort, CABI has joined forces with other institutions like ICIPE, IITA, and African Union to be able to come up with a strategy in managing invasive species. The strategy is very key on prevention and eradication of invasive species for those that are already present, but those that have already been identified in terms the strategy focuses on prevention of introduction. So I've highlighted what this particular strategy is on, but what is key on is marshalling all the strength and synergies from public, private sector, and civil society in terms of collective focus in prevention, eradication, and management of invasive species that have already been introduced. Right here is Parthenia, which has really affected the grazing lands and also the production lands in Africa, and continues to spread also across African countries. So I've highlighted a number of activities, projects that target the management of this invasive, or if you like, the transboundary pests. Now I just want to also highlight some of the efforts when it comes to strengthening the SPS system to support trade, especially safe trade, that will reduce the spread of these pests further into other countries, including the UK, because UK is also a big trading partner to most of the African countries. So some of the projects we have when it comes to strengthening SPS system and supporting trade is one, to develop the private sector support in terms of emergency response for a number of pests that affect the trade. For instance, in this case, EAC partner states. We've undertaken training on determination of pest status, because in some cases, the trading partners require declaration of some of their quarantine pests of interest. And also we have undertaken a training on ISPM 14. This is on a systems approach for pest risk management, so that as we export and trade with other partners, we assure that the products that we are sharing with them are free of pests of importance to them. We also undertake a number of capacity building, for instance, targeted on fruits and vegetable value chains in Uganda. We've also undertaken support, for instance, in Ghana, to enhance exports to EU due to a number of non-compliances due to presence of quarantine organisms in the export that they had with EU. Also, we are developing information material for value chain specific, for instance, avocado value chain good practice that encompasses all from production and to the point of exit, to ensure that the products that we send out are are compliant to the market requirements. We've undertaken risk analysis, and we continue to do so to be able to help these countries be able to identify risks before this risk actually enter their countries, that they have instituted measures that help to control the introduction. Currently, we have a project with the AU, that is the Regional Phytosanitary Plant Protection Organization in Africa, and this is to build capacity on pest risk analysis of their member states, but also to build on adoption of electronic phytosanitary certificates to enhance compliance to trade. One of the other very unique projects is about the One Health project in Kenya and Uganda. And here we have combined the plant health issues, animal health issues, and also food safety. And we are looking at enhancing our farmers' knowledge as a wholesome scale on this particular project. CABI has also developed a number of tools to support the identification of potential risks and their management. And in this slide, I'm just highlighting a tool that we have developed with partners. This is Horizon Scanning Tool. This tool helps countries be able to identify potential invasive species to a country or a region. And thereafter, they can undertake a risk analysis to be able to put up measures to reduce the risk. I'll not go into details because of time. Also, this is a very well-renowned tool by CABI. This is the CABI Crop Protection Compendium. It really gives a lot of information on plant health that is very helpful, either for risk analysis, but also as a general research tool, as a source of scientific information on plant health. The other tool here is the pest risk analysis tool, and this tool is very supportive in terms of decision-making when undertaking pest risk analysis. It's online-based and quite used by NPPOs when they undertake pest risk analysis. Another project that just recently came to an end is the Pest Risk Information Service. This project was funded by the UKSA, the UK Space Agency, And in this project, what we were doing, we were looking at the management of endemic pests, looking at the possibility of doing pest modeling using space information in terms of satellite weather data, in terms of on-ground weather data, to be able to model pest development and share the risk with farmers before these outbreaks occur on their farm, so that they can be able to take management practices in time. In this slide is a research institution staff, which were collaborative partners in the project, taking data on bean fly, a very, very important pest on beans at the production level. So this information, once we generate the pest model data, we share them with farmers so that they prepare in advance in terms of pests that they need to manage for the specific crops that we were working on. We would like to continue with this particular project. However, the UK Space Agency funding ended, but we are seeking funding to be able to continue with the particular work on the pest risk for endemic pests. Another pilot that we undertook is on this desert locust. As you are aware, about 2019-2020, we had a big outbreak on desert locust in the East Africa region, really affected the production and devastated the environment. And we are piloting the use of drones in terms of surveillance and in terms of pest management when it comes to spraying of the desert locust where they have. The pilot was very successful, and given the remoteness of sometimes the desert locusts where they occur and how it's difficult to manage it, it was very important that this use of tools like drone can be used for surveillance, but also for the management. In this presentation, as I started, I mentioned that we also have a number of challenges, but also opportunities. We have identified the issue of porous borders, the issues of weak biosecurity, the inadequate capacity when it comes to pest risk analysis, pest monitoring, pest modeling and surveillance, and also lack of tools for effective surveillance. And there have been efforts to try, especially for instance, drone, but also efforts to build this capacity. But more is needed, especially looking at the risks that we have in terms of plant health that will affect our trade. But there are also opportunities. These particular challenge areas are opportunities, and we would like to continue building and mentoring risk analysis. Pest modeling is an area of really weak capacity, and surveillance as well, and especially also on diagnostics, especially tools that support quick diagnostics are also something that is of interest currently in Africa. ICT decision support tools, diagnosis and pest surveillance, and even modeling are things that we can really be able to help us in terms of managing these transboundary pests. And also strategies in terms of pest management. For instance, low risk based approaches when you're looking at plant protection products, also the use of classical biological control, because this is a very sustainable way in managing some of these invasive pests. I want to leave you with a short video. I hope it will play before we can stop and just interact and have Q&A session. So let me, I hope it will play.
To be in the middle of a swarm, nothing ever prepares you in life for such a thing. These are million flying insects that are going past you, and that's when
let me see again.
To be in the middle of a swarm, nothing ever prepares you in life for such a thing. These are million flying insects that are going past you, and that's when it hit me about the scale of the problem we had and the scale of the solution that was needed with our partners, so that we can effectively come up with a solution that works and works best for Africa.
When the drone comes in to complement the existing method, this will be an advantage to the farmers.
And they've specifically been designed to be operated in very tough terrain and access very inaccessible areas that other systems cannot be able to reach.
This had been my dream to work on how the technologies can be used to control pests. Going hungry will never be a story in Kenya in some years to come.
So you can see that the potential of actually even using other ways to supplement the normal ways of doing surveillance, especially for pests like desert locusts. And I believe there are potential in other areas, especially when it comes to use of Internet of Things, use of other sensors in monitoring of pests. So I want to believe that there's potential that you also can be able to chip in and support. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MaryLucy. That's very, very interesting indeed. Okay, so as you said, I encourage everyone to ask any questions that you have, put them in the Q&A, not in the chat. So please do that. But let me ask a question to start. So obviously we're talking about phytosanitary measures across Africa. That was the main topic. But can you give us an idea what specific challenges there are specifically in Africa and maybe in East Africa you can talk about for phytosanitary issues that might not be there in the US or in Western Europe or elsewhere? Anything specific you can say?
Thank you. You realize that most African countries, their economies are agriculture-based. And in terms of that, there's a lot of export of produce into other regions, including UK, EU, the US, in terms of fresh produce, and even the UAE as well. One of the things that is a big challenge, especially currently, is these invasive pests. Once they come into our environment, they become an important pest in the export market. Okay, the production, the systems, we end up having these invasive pests as endemic at some point. Therefore, it means that plant protection products are going to be used in terms of their management. The current market also for the users, for instance, Parry, is to have a product that has no pesticide. No pesticide has been used on it, and that is a big challenge because these invasive pests, there's need to use plant protection products, and when you use plant protection product, then there's a risk of food safety, and therefore having a system where you have very limited use of pest control products is very challenging. Also, they use access to low risk, for instance, pest control products, for instance, the biopesticides, or issues to do with the classical biological control that will warrant that particular low residue levels are quite challenging. However, the production system is now going towards integrated approach where you use a different approaches in terms of plant pest management to be able to comply with that requirement of the export companies. But as new invasive pests come, so there's need to have a new product, and also there's changing market requirements. So when it comes to sanitary issues, there's issues of really always adapting to that risk, but also ensuring you comply to the export market. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few questions coming in. So a question from Sven Buckingham. And this is kind of goes from the other perspective, asks whether within your region, whether there's selective breeding or genetic modification happening on the papaya or the banana crops that are under threat.
Yeah, so I would discuss this with Altos from Stellenbosch, and currently there is no efforts. In fact, a genetically modified banana is not acceptable at the moment. So there is just breeding in terms of identifying resistance in other varieties, for instance, of Cavendish, and promoting those. But of course, that issues of GMO is still under discussion and not so well accepted in Africa. And sometimes even the importing countries, when it comes to the consumers, it's something that is still under discussion. There's also the issue of the other breeding technologies, for instance, on maize and cotton, that is exploring the possibility of, introducing maybe genes like BT genes into maize or cotton, but these are still under protected control research. So it's not yet out there. But yeah, this is something I could also maybe share later. But that is the position as on breeding on GMOs, for instance. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a couple of linked questions from one from Lucy Carson Taylor, and also from the rather enigmatic M10000111. And and they ask: so are the farmers and growers willing to take on biosecurity measures due to your outreach and education, or do you think it takes legislative intervention instead?
Yeah, thank you. I think when it comes to biosecurity measures in terms of pests management to either reduce the possibility of introduction to a field, it's something that most of the farmers, it's what is in it for me? What is the economic value if I do it? Some of these pests they do not know boundaries either at farm level or at country level. So if I'm controlling it at my farm, there's likelihood it can self-disperse into my unit from other farms that probably are not doing control. And therefore, what we are reaching out with farmers is how do you benefit when you do an area-wide control. We see a bit of that happening, but not at the scale that would actually endeavor to have a low pest population area. For instance, if you take fruit fly, it attacks a number of hosts. So you institute, for instance, sex pheromones on your farm, but the other farm that is neighboring you does not do. And therefore, they will still fly in and attack your mangoes. So it is an area that the legislation needs to come out strongly and be able to institute. If it's an area-wide management, this is how we are going to do it in this area, so that we have either establish a pest-free area or a low pest population area. However, that return on investment in terms for an individual farmer may not be seen, and therefore it is a situation where we are saying, can the government or the exporting companies, which if you have a cooperative, be able to purchase, for instance, the fruit fly sex pheromones for their members? So it is an area-wide application. However, reaching there needs a legislation so that this is implemented. That is still lacking in most of the countries. In some countries in Africa, they may not even have a Plant Protection Act that specifies how a country can probably manage invasive pests, or what legislation should be there to tackle a particular pest. And therefore, at individual level, the farmers are really affected with a problem that could be managed at an area-wide through legislation, or through just coming together as farmer units, for instance, of a value chain like mango or other value chains like maize. However, when it comes to plants for planting, the legislation is very clear in most countries. For instance, on maize, for maize lethal necrosis disease, country like Kenya, the condition is that the seed must be grown in a place where MND is not present, or the seed being exported has been tested and found free from MNFD. So there are different categories, but when it comes to domestic value chains, it's really difficult to have that legislation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit linked to that is a question from anonymous attendee who asks about reporting. And I know that CABI have a lot of tools to encourage reporting, but what do you think is the key to improving that reporting in East Africa?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Just last week, we had the IPPC regional workshop for Africa held in Nairobi, which I attended. And pest reporting was a key area. And indeed, most African countries are not reporting the pest statuses as is required. A number of countries are performing greatly in this area. I can mention South Africa, for instance, Mozambique, Rwanda, amongst others. The issue is a bit of also the plant protection policies that these countries have. Sometimes us as researchers, we know this particular pest is present in Uganda, for instance, or Tanzania, but you don't see them reporting to the IPPC as required of the contracting parties. And therefore, this is a limiting. We still find there's a possibility perhaps to report at African level, or is there a possibility to report at REC level, like the ESC Secretariat, for instance? But countries are not just reporting. Perhaps they don't see the value in reporting this, but IPPC is very clear that contracting parties should report the pest status, or even just a list of quarantine pests for their countries. Most countries don't find it under IPPC on the country pages. So it's a problem everywhere. But what we do as CABI is when we have these phytosanitary capacity building workshops, we really want to raise awareness about that. The opportunities that the countries can target, for instance, linking with researchers or farmers, because researchers and farmers are likely to detect a pest than an NPPO. And how do they report it to the NPPO? And how does the NPPO then report to IPPC? These are still areas that are very gray, but we seek always the countries to be able to report. That's something that we are very keen on as CABI. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a more specific question. So questions from Anthony Favela, and this is I had a few questions about this as well, so I'll kind of link a few things together. So he's asking about the biocontrol agent for the papaya mealyworm, so that's Acerphagus papaya, and asking first of all if it has any side effects on other plants in the environment. And my question was now linked to that, is how much of that wasp do you have to put on the plants, and do you have to put it on every year, or once it's on, it's there for life? How does that work?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this is, as I mentioned, or even the CABI team are currently in the field with partners to be able to release this biological control agent. We've undertaken laboratory testing on if it can feed onto others, non-target organisms. There has been a risk analysis on what of the potential of it becoming a pest later on, and a team of experts were put together to review this particular biological control agent. And I think there was green light to proceed in terms of the risk that it poses to probably non-targeted organisms in the field. For now, it solely feeds on the papaya mealybug pest and not any other. We don't expect any side effects on the environment or on the targeted hosts, for instance, in this case, papaya. The same organism has been released in Pakistan and also in West Africa, Ghana, and it had a tremendous impact in terms of controlling the papaya mealybug. The current release, this is just a few weeks after the initial release, and before end of the year, there's a plan to go back to the first release sites to just see how this is progressing. However, in terms of how many are released per tree or how many are, that information I don't have at the moment. Okay. But the population, the incidence level of papaya mealybug has been very high. So I think the pest has a lot to feed on currently and multiply and they have a sustainable control impact on papaya mealybug. Yeah, on the papaya mealybug pest, yes. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so next question, and we've got lots of questions. Obviously, you raised a lot of interest with your talk, which is great. So next question from the excellent Connected Virus Network, which is based at the University of Bristol in the UK. So they say thanks for a very interesting presentation. And could you tell us a little more about the PRISE, or the PRISE system? So that's the Pest Risk Information Service, yeah. And then how is the rainfall and temperature data generated through that shared with the farmers? And how do they, so what format do they get it? A little more detail about how that information is passed between researchers and farmers.
Yeah, thank you. So for the Pest Risk Information Service project that was funded by the UKSA, we had a number of partners in the UK. We had a similar, we also had the King's College London. And what we were doing in this particular project is also partnering with the Kenya Agricultural Research Organization. This is the National Agricultural Research Organization in Kenya. We also did the same project in Ghana and in Zambia. So what we are looking at were a number of pests for a number of crops. I will just take an example of maize, for instance. Maize, we are looking at fall armyworm. So here we are generating information on weather data. So the rainfall data, we were capturing the rainfall data using the rain gauges, of course, at different validation sites in the agroecological zone, at the different agroecological zone we're working on. And we're also generating the temperature recordings. This we were using sensors that would collect the temperature data after every 10 minutes in the field in these validation sites. And now what we were doing, we had a similar technologist, I think an offset of University of Reading, doing the pest modeling. So we would generate this pest observation data in the fields. So we collect the weather, we collect temperature, rainfall, and relay that to the modelers. Now, the other thing we were doing is to observe the first flight of adult fall armyworm in the site. So we'd have sex pheromones in the fields, we plant maize, then we start observing days before we plant, and after germination, we start observing this pest. And then we look at the population of the adults, we look at when they lay the first eggs, how the larvae are developing. And this information would be used to generate pest models that we now share with farmers in terms of, for instance, a message would go out like, your maize is at this leaf side level. We are observing fall armyworm eggs in your field. After 3 or 4 days, you need to spray your field because the fall armyworm larvae will be at more susceptible stage in terms of control. And this would go to farmers as a message. And they would now go to scout. The message would also encourage them to scout the field. And if they see this particular pests in their field at the stage we have said, they will also relay for us feedback, and we use that as a crowdsourced feedback, but also give them measures they would undertake. So you need to spray, or you need to wait before you spray, a few days before you spray, things like that. So this was very important for farmers who are doing maize, and also we did the same for tomatoes on Tuta absoluta. I think the name has now changed. So the tomato leaf miner, and also on beans, the bean stem maggot. So these are the things that we were generating and using that to share with the farmers in a particular location. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's great use of technology there. So next question is, so I'm going to go back to a question about reporting. Actually, really interesting question from Fiona Jones.
Yeah.
And she asks about farmers on the ground. So how much do you think farmers may be aware of the pests, but they don't want to report it because there's a fear that their crops will be destroyed? And is there compensation for farmers that have pests on their farm?
Okay.
And,
All right.
and then the fields have to be destroyed?
Yeah. Thank you, Fiona, for the question. Actually, the first people who will detect that something is not normal is happening at their fields are farmers. Farmers have credible information in terms of the pests that they observe on their fields, especially those that are very devastating. So they will be able to actually detect that something is amiss with my crop. I don't know what it is. It's something I've not seen before. So we in Kenya, we have a ministry department that deals with such. So they are able to call them, and then a team is dispatched to the field and linking up with other partners, like for instance, the NPPO, the diagnostics, even CABI, to be able to identify. And in some cases, when a farmer actually highlights that there's something unique in their crop, those pests have actually turned to be new. Another example I can give is the giant, the golden snail, the golden apple snail on rice. The farmers in that rice growing area started reporting there's something that is not right. We've not seen it before. So at farmer level, there's no fear, because the government, in case the government has to destroy, then there are possible ways on how they are compensated. Now, what now happens after that diagnosis in terms of reporting it to IPPC as required is a different scenario. But at farmer level, they're very much concerned something is not happening right with my crop and I need help. And therefore, they easily report to the authorities, and we go and take samples, we identify, and then loop up the information to NPPO and the ministry to take action. Where this, they maybe need to destroy the crop, then the compensation needs to happen. However, I haven't seen a situation where that compensation has happened in real sense. I highlighted that most of the cases, eradication is something that we still need to build that capacity on. I think it's a long way, but it's important. And I think only when you destroy, for instance, a crop, because this is the only point of detection for these new pests, then you need to design ways to compensate. Yeah.
Okay, so we're reaching the end of our time, but I'm going to ask one more question, which is quite a broad question again. This is from Charles Lane, and Charles rightly says that all the focus has been about food security, basically, but he's wondering, in your area in East Africa, how much concern is there on actually protecting the natural environment rather than just securing food security, and whether that's an issue that comes into play when you're discussing these issues about use of pesticides that might not be so great for the environment, for example. Are those conversations you're having with farmers?
Yeah. Thank you. One point I want to make that import control in terms of really reducing the possibility of new invasions or invasions that are within the country spreading to other countries is still very weak. Okay. Now, when it comes to pest control, most of the time when it is detected, there's a very reactionary way to manage this pest, and the only way is we want to see this new pest dead. And there's a lot of spray. Of course, that affects the environment in terms of non-target organism, but also the safety, the general safety. However, the conversation now is how do we ensure that we do not use this hardcore, let's say, pesticides that are very, knock the doo-doo. Doo-doo in Kenya is an insect, knock the doo-doo dead. But a way to be able to use low-risk pesticides, biopesticides, for instance, biological control, for instance, that have more sustainable and environmental friendly. However, in some cases, when a new pest comes, there may not be no low-risk pesticide maybe registered that is available in the country, and therefore there is always, as a reaction you face, using what is available that can be able to target that. We see this a lot, especially when we had fall armyworm, but I think this is the discussion we need to go forward and push there's current interest on low-risk pesticides, on having an emergency response mechanisms for high-risk pests in the region. So we need to go with that momentum and be able to design and be able to acquire some safer products, low-risk biopesticides, for instance. What is the registration process? How can we fast-track that so that we don't end up hurting the environment and non-target organisms, including bees, for instance, that are important for pollination. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So thank you very much, MaryLucy. That's really excellent. That's super interesting, and I'm glad we had lots of questions. So we're gonna leave it there now since our hour is up. Let me thank you again for that. Let me remind everyone that this has been recorded and it will appear on the RSB YouTube site, and somewhere on RSB it will be reported to you, and there'll be a survey circulated as well about the event as well. So thanks very much, everyone, and we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you at the next event in a few months.